David Cobb is with. I regularly on this program rant about how the original sin in our constitutionally limited representative democratic republic that has become a constitutional monarchy is the result of the excesses of the Supreme Court. The original sin is money. Money in politics, money as speech, corporations, organized capital, having the rights of persons under the Constitution, and the group doing something about it is MoveToAmend.org. David Cobb, the national spokesperson for Move to Amend, former Green Party candidate for President of the United States, on the line with us. Hey, David.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I am great. It has been too long since we've talked. So I understand you have surpassed 500 local and county resolutions and 15 states saying it's time to amend the Constitution to say corporations aren't people and money is not speech.
Well, Tom, it's true. We've helped to pass over 500 city and county resolutions. Most of them deal with both corporate constitutional rights, also known as corporate personhood, and money as speech. Those 15 state resolutions, some are just about overturning Citizens United, some are just about getting money out of elections, some are about getting money out of elections and making it clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights. We've also, more importantly, helped to put this issue on the ballot in 28 jurisdictions, and we've won every single one of them. The point is that there is a growing awareness that the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land. In essence, Tom, it codifies the social contract. Well, our current social contract is fundamentally flawed. It does not actually allow for a truly functioning democratic republic. More and more people are willing to acknowledge that. Now the question becomes, and is becoming, how far are we willing to go? At Move to Amend, we are clear and explicit, and we are the only grouping that says, without doubt, we must amend the Constitution to say that only living, breathing human beings have any inherent, unalienable constitutional rights, and money is not speech. Those are two related but distinct legal doctrines, both created illegitimately by the United States Supreme Court, that are allowing a small ruling elite not just to exercise power, but to rule over us. I really appreciate how you're actually willing to talk about this becoming a de facto monarchy, but it's a monarchy based on capital. It's not even lineage anymore. And that's what Move to Amend is doing, mobilizing a nonviolent revolutionary movement that says we, the people, are actually supposed to govern in this country, and damn it all, we're going to.
David, educate me about constitutional conventions. Back, for a long time, people would say to me, oh, we need a constitutional convention. And I would say, no, I don't want to open up the whole Constitution, particularly in an era when half the politicians participating in the process have been bought off by the Koch brothers, and tinker with it. And then, somebody who was an attorney and a constitutional expert called me up and said, no. You can either drive a constitutional amendment like Move to Amend is proposing down through the legislature, through Congress, or you can drive it up from the states, and that's called a constitutional convention under the Constitution. What is it, Article 4, Article 5? And
Article 5.
Article 5, yeah.
Exactly right.
Inform me and all of our listeners and viewers.
Well, let's be clear. There are two ways that the Constitution provides for an amendment, both of which are in Article 5. The first is the way we're most familiar with. 2/3 of Congress pass a proposed amendment, then it goes to the states for ratification, either through state legislatures or state initiatives.
Is that the way every single one has been done since the Bill of Rights?
So far, absolutely yes, the way that ultimately everyone. However, several of them were provoked by calls for a constitutional convention, which is where the history gets both more complex but also more interesting, Tom. And Article 5 also provides that if 2/3 of the states call for a constitutional convention, then a convention is called, and whatever comes out of that process must still go back to the states for ratification through a 3/4 process. But Tom, the Constitution itself is silent on whether a convention can be called and open up everything, or whether it can be called for express limited purposes. Virtually every constitutional scholar I've talked about has said, well, look, it gives the states the power to call a convention. So if a state votes to say we are calling a constitutional convention for the express purpose of considering the Move to Amend, We the People amendment, to say only human beings have constitutional rights and money is not speech, then most scholars agree. If that's the reason that state called that convention, that's the only thing that can be actually proposed coming out of such a convention.
Now, does a convention mean that there's actually a convention that, like a political party convention, a bunch of people get together in a room and hammer out?
No, and that's again where the complexity comes in, because most scholars agree that if a convention has been called for a precise, limited purpose, then there is no need for such a convention because the convention has already been called. So that's where I suspect your friend who is the lawyer that she or he was talking about, if a limited in scope convention is called by any state, there is an argument to be made that you do not need to actually have human beings come together and have a typical political party style convention, because it has already triggered what the Constitution requires for the convention.
So if 2/3 of the states pass, this would have to be something other than a non-binding resolution, which is the stuff that has happened up to this point. Pass an actual amendment to the Constitution in the wrapper of a call for a constitutional convention. Then Congress must convene and consider it. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Not Congress. It goes to the states for consideration.
It completely bypasses Congress.
It completely bypasses Congress. And Tom, if you look at what we're doing at Move to Amend in Minnesota, we're exceptionally proud to be working with State Senator John Marty, who has been our champion to try to pass binding legislation that actually triggers the Constitutional Convention. In other words, not a non-binding resolution, this is what we think, but instead calling for the Minnesota State Legislature to be the first state to call for a constitutional convention for the express purpose of ratifying the Move to Amend We the People Amendment. It is our contention that when 2/3 of the states call that, then we have triggered the Constitutional Convention. That much is clear.
Now,
the question about whether...
Who arbitrates, that's the wrong word, who's in charge of this process? I mean, when 2/3 of the states have hit this threshold, there has to be, at least a keeper of the vote. I mean, there has to be some mechanism to make this happen. If you're going around Congress, does the executive branch handle this? Does the judicial branch handle it?
Tom, I love how precise you are with your thinking. The answer is the vote total is actually capped by Congress. And that's why it's important to recognize that although we are triggering it through the Constitution, that Congress itself is responsible for doing that vote count. And the question about whether a constitutional convention is actually convened with living, breathing human beings is a function of what each of those states has called for.
Now, this would require each one... excuse me, David, we just have a minute left. This would require each state to pass identical language, though, wouldn't it? Otherwise, you'd have a problem like you do with the House and Senate and having to go to conference.
Exactly right. And that's the reason why we think it's so important to get this language right. And, Tom, the second thing, I know we're running out of time, but I really want to underscore how important it is that we recognize that merely by building a movement calling for it, we begin to shift the political culture, because the amendment guaranteeing 18-year-olds the right to vote, it got nowhere in Congress until states began to call for a constitutional convention for the purpose of considering that. And within 1 year, less than 1 year, Tom, from states beginning that process, Congress got its act together and made a proposal.
Yeah, it was less than a year that it took from the time that was introduced until it was ratified. And you know what triggered that, David, according to some historians, is Barry McGuire's song, Eve of Destruction. You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. We need to get Jackson Browne to write and perform a song.
I love it.
Right? Take it viral. I mean, because Barry McGuire made that thing. Senator Brown and I have had this conversation on the air. Anyhow, David Cobb, movetoamend.org. David, keep up. You're doing God's work. Keep it up.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity.